If you cast your eyes into infinity, from millions of miles, paths of yesterday, sure you've traveled far, but never lost your way.
Hello everybody. I've got the honor and privilege of introducing Neale Donald Walsch to this lecture and the weekend. And I'm very, very happy for doing that. And I do really sincerely believe we are going to change the world in this weekend. Yeah. And I would just start with saying thank you to all of you for being here, because you are part of creating that field will make the change of consciousness and spirituality possible. We are going to work with this weekend. And I'm also going to say thank you to Neale Donald Walsch as he comes here. I could start with his bragging list. He has sold 10 million books, being all over the world spoken. But I would start with something different when I choose him. I'm very impressed by the man's spirituality. And I'm even more impressed after meeting him for some days with his humanity. I think that is very great. And I'm also more impressed by his willingness to do the work he's doing and trying so much and giving so much from his heart and his wisdom. So I would just say thank you very, very much to Neale Donald Walsch for coming and sharing with us. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Wow. We could get one or two more people in the room, it seems to me, but wow. Welcome. It's nice to have you here. My name is Neale, and yours is not. I have, wow, it's just feedback here. Who's handling the sound? Is there anybody on the soundboard? Because if there is, then you want to turn it down a bit. There you go. That's cool. Thank you. I have here something I rarely bring to a talk, and that's a few notes. I almost never speak from notes, because I have been saying things that I say for years, and I have it most of it memorized. But tonight and the other day in Oslo, here in Norway, I've wanted to broach a new subject. So because I'm talking about something just a little bit new, I thought I would make some notes about what I wanted to say and how I wanted to say it. You all in a good mood tonight? Yeah. That's great. We're going to be here for about 6 hours. Okay, 4. And what we're going to do is talk for about an hour and a half. There will be no intermission because 2 hours is all I have. So if you need to leave the room a bit, to use the facility or whatever, please feel free to do so. But I'll be going right straight through till around 9 o'clock or so. And then we'll also have a little bit of time for questions and answers. So if you need to leave early, if you can't stay, please feel free to leave as well. My feelings won't be hurt. And that'll be perfectly okay. If I sit down over here, can you see me? No, okay. So much for that chair. Okay? In that case, I'll bring this out a little bit over here. I don't think I need this. This can disappear. And can see me here, yes? No, you can't. Okay, terrific. They really did some planning here when they set the stage up. You see that? Okay. Too bad if you can't see me now. So there's one person who can't see me. You'll have to watch the screen. Oh, the screen's here. Oh, well, then you can see me if I'm sitting over here. Terrific. Okay. Tonight, we're going to talk about something I think that's pretty important. And I've never talked about this before in the way I'm going to talk about it tonight. Except 2 nights ago in Oslo. That was the first time. So I've come to Norway to present for the first time an idea that I've been entertaining in my mind for quite a while. And I'd like to share it with you tonight here as well. I could think of no better place to introduce this idea than in this country. Because frankly, I've been here before, been to Norway 2 or 3 times before, and each time I come here, I'm impressed with the level of intellectual curiosity and open-mindedness about certain topics that I find here. In addition, I think that people here have a very, could I put it this way, intelligent concept about life and sort of a, how do I put this? Advanced, do I say that? Dare I say that? Ideas about God. That is, I think when I travel around this country and talk to people individually, I hear ideas about this thing we call God that are different from what I hear in the United States, elsewhere in the world. I think that by and large, not all people, but many people in Norway have given up the idea of a grandfather God who lives high in the sky somewhere, who has a wonderful white beard and long flowing hair and wears a suit coat with a gray tie. And so I think that your ideas of God are, if you have a thought about God at all existing, are a little bit more, how do I say, mature than a lot of people. It would surprise you, or perhaps not, to know that millions of people, I'm going to say billions of people, still in fact believe in a kind of a grandfather God, a provider, a protector, a punisher, the 3 P's, provide, protect, punish. Billions of people still believe in that kind of a God and get very upset if we speak in terms other than that. So we are going to speak in terms other than that tonight, however, because I have come to talk to you about a new kind of God. I've come to talk to you about a brand new idea, a big idea that I believe would change human history, that would change the world, if it were ever embraced fully by human beings on this earth. I believe it will be embraced by human beings on this earth. I don't think it's a question of whether, but rather a question simply of when. So I'd like to talk about that tonight. So tonight we're going to talk about God. If that subject doesn't interest you, brother, are you in the wrong room? Because I wrote a book called Conversations with God, not conversations with food or conversations with cars or conversations with sports or politics, but in fact, conversations with God. How many of you have read, may I ask, one or more of my books? Raise your hand. Oh, brother. Oh. That's what I was afraid of. Now I'm really in trouble. Because by a show of hands, it's clear to me that virtually everyone in the room has some idea, pretty much of a good idea, of everything I'm going to do and say, every move I make up here. You're already aware of. I feel a bit like Madonna's next husband on his wedding night. I mean, I know what it is that I want to do, I'm just not certain I can make it interesting. But like him, I'm going to try. I think the world would benefit extraordinarily right now from a new big idea. But before I share with you that big idea, let me tell you that the idea is not mine. The idea is the idea of life itself. The idea I'm going to share with you tonight, I believe, is the result of a process that we could loosely call evolution. That is, I think we evolve into our next best idea about many things through the process of education, research, discovery, experimentation, and experience. And that's how we've advanced our science, our technology, our medicine, and it's how I now suggest we might benefit from advancing our religion or our spiritual experience, if we are to have any meaningful spiritual experience at all. Now, there's something interesting about that. Our religions have, as I'm sure you know, I'm not telling you anything you aren't aware of, but just recapping for the room, our religions have not been really willing to advance in the same way that science, medicine, technology, as an example, have advanced. You know, when a scientist conducts an experiment and it's not working too well, after a number of repeated attempts, he looks at the results, and if the results aren't what he expected or hoped for, he tosses the experiment out and tries something different. And by that device, we move forward, we advance. We are willing in science, we are willing in medicine, we are willing in technology to ask the daring question: is it possible that there's something we still don't fully understand here? The understanding of which would change everything. We're also willing to do something else in science, medicine, and technology that's quite daring, and we should pat ourselves on the back for that, because we're willing to do that. We are willing to question the prior information. We're willing to question the prior data. In fact, science is based on that. Even if an experiment turns out successfully, even if an experiment turns out to be a success, the good scientist begins immediately to question the data. Is it possible that there's more to know on this subject? Or what if that outcome, even though it appears to be successful, is not telling us all we need to know? So by this means of questioning the prior data, we improve our understanding and make these advances. Now, in religion, you might notice that the one thing we're not allowed to do is to question the prior data. That is, somebody told us something 2,000 years ago, or 1,500 years ago, or 1,200 years ago, or 500 years ago, and that's it. We're not allowed to question it. To question it would be what's called blasphemy, or heresy, or apostasy. And in some countries, in fact, the crime of apostasy is, in fact, not only an ecclesiastical crime, not only a crime against the faith, but in fact a civil crime. That is, there are civil laws against even questioning the prior data. I recall an incident a few years ago that we all saw in the papers, I'm sure you might remember it, of a man who was attending a class on a certain faith, and he stood up and questioned the teaching of the prophet of that particular faith. He said, I'm just wondering, what if that's not true? I mean, just out of curiosity, where would that take us? And he was immediately hustled out of the room, and charges were placed against him, civil charges, that is, civil law. And he was found guilty of those charges, which amounted to what you would call apostasy. And he was sentenced to death. To death. That would probably discourage further questions from the audience. I thought I would tell you tonight that we are imposing the same sentence on anyone who questions me tonight. So just assume that I am absolutely right and accurate in everything I say, and we're going to get along fine. You should treat me the way you treat any other spiritual teacher, I would think. So, by the way, you'll be happy to know that the government relented after an international outcry. I mean, people around the world of all faiths were scandalized and said so. And the outcry was so enormous that the government was literally embarrassed out of imposing the death sentence. So they simply told the guy to leave the country. They guess where they sent him? To the Vatican. They did. They sent him to Italy, to Rome. They threw him out of the country, and he had to start his life over again in Italy, which is a tough sentence in itself when you think about it. No, just kidding. It's just that nothing works right in Italy. You know, trains don't run on time, and clocks. I mean, nothing works right. But it's a lovely country other than that. And I'm just having fun here. But anyway, they deported him to get him, out of the country. But I can tell you that it kind of threw cold water on anyone who thought about questioning that faith again in public, and maybe even in private, because they have like behavior police. They have like faith police in countries like that. I'm not making this up. They really do. And if you question anything, even in private, somebody could report you. And then the faith police, the behavior police come to your house and they take you away. So it's kind of like a chilling factor, I would say, on open discussion. So we see then, and while other nations have not gone quite as far, it is nevertheless socially and spiritually discouraged to question the prior assumption. Not okay to question the prior assumption when it comes to matters of religion or matters of faith. Now, if we did that in science, medicine, and technology, we of course would have gotten nowhere. Got to question the prior assumption. Can't have any sacred cows, so to speak. Everything has to be at least questionable, but not in religion. Now, if we did the same thing in medicine, for instance, it might be like, moving into an operating room tomorrow, preparing to conduct brain surgery with a very sharp stick. In other words, the point is using 2,000-year-old methods to conduct a medical procedure in the year 2009. So here we are, stuck then, trying to apply 2,000-year-old or 1,500-year-old or 500-year-old tools or ideas to a very modern kind of a world, where things are occurring that those ideas may not have any application. Let me give you an example. A woman lies in the hospital. She is pregnant and about to deliver. in a few days. And she's been brought to the hospital because she is actually carrying triplets, so they need to give her a little bit extra care. So there she is in the hospital and preparing to deliver her triplets, and the doctor walks in. And he says, you know, I have some interesting news. We have done some in utero examination of the embryos, and we've discovered that one of your children is carrying one of your babies is carrying the cellular signature, the DNA, if you please, for, I'm making this up now, by the way, this actually happened. I forgot what the actual, but let's say for a major illness, muscular dystrophy, we'll say. And the mother says, oh my gosh, I mean, is there nothing to be done? What does that mean? And the doctor says, well, it means that there's a high likelihood that your child could develop muscular dystrophy in his lifetime, probably before adulthood. That's just, I mean, we're sorry, but we see that in the DNA. And the mother again asks, well, is there nothing to be done? And the doctor says, well, you know, actually, yes, we could do something. With your consent and permission, we could move into the DNA structure of your baby. We could do what we would call loosely genetic engineering. We can rearrange the DNA sequencing and eliminate the possibility, or certainly greatly reduce the possibility, of your child developing this disease. And the mother says, but gosh, wouldn't that be like designer babies? I mean, are you telling me you have the ability to alter DNA sequencing in utero? I mean, you could change a child's eye colors or hair or height, or much less the cellular signature for certain diseases. And the doctor says, well, we do have that ability now to do that. And sometimes it can be very helpful, as in this case. So if you'll just sign the form here, we can undertake the procedure. And the mother says, well, this is a bit unusual. Could I just think about this for a while? The doctor says, of course, but please don't wait too long, because if we're going to do this, we really need to do it like now, in the next day or two. Okay, so she says, give me some time. And now she's in search, you understand, in search of a moral compass, something in what she's learned about life, from her philosophy, from her psychology, from her theology. She's looking for some moral compass. Is this okay? I mean, is this like tampering with the laws of nature? Is this against the law of God? If there even is a God, I mean, how do I deal with what? So she calls her pastor, and he happily comes over, and they discuss it. And she says, you know, Pastor, what should I do? There's nothing I don't know what to do here. And the pastor says, you know, there's nothing in the Bible about this. I mean, but I gotta tell you, it doesn't feel good to me. It feels like it's a violation of God's will. If God's will was for the child to be born without this problem, then the child would be. And so this is like the will of God. You're tampering with the will of God here. I can't tell you what to do, but I can tell you how I feel about it, and that's how I feel. So the woman decides, I just can't do it. So the doctor comes back, and the woman says, I can't do it. I can't sign the form. We'll have to just, because this is the will of God. And the doctor says, well, not to make you wrong, but may I ask a question? If after the child is born, maybe even a few moments after the child is born, we could do something, possibly, would that be okay with you, and would that be in line with your faith? And she says, of course, oh my gosh. Yeah, as soon as the child is born, I mean, bring all the miracles of modern medical science to play. I mean, do whatever you could possibly do. Help me and help my child, absolutely. So the doctor says, so in other words, if we apply modern medical miracles to your child's situation 1 minute after birth, that's okay, but 2 minutes before birth would not be okay. Is that what you're telling me? And the woman says, I guess so. So if we perform the miracle in utero, but postpartum, after the birth, okay. And the doctor, of course, as a scientist and as a medical, man, is trying very hard to understand how you put that data together. What makes one right and one wrong? What makes one okay and one not okay? When did God say, no miracles before birth, please? Unless, of course, you happen to have been the Virgin Mary, in which case, that's fine. Look, I'm not trying to make light of anyone's faith, and if people, sometimes people walk out of the room when I lecture. They actually leave, and it's okay. If you really feel offended at the level of your faith, then you do need to leave the room. You're not getting your money back, but you do need to leave the room. But I want to tell you sincerely and humbly, I'm hoping that I'm not offending anybody. I'm trying to illustrate the problem of dealing with 21st century circumstances and situations with a first century theology, yes? With ideas of what God wants that we've had put in our heads for millennia, and that were created by the spiritual teachers and interpreters of those days who had no way of even conceiving of what's going on in the 21st century. So how do you overlay that kind of moral or spiritual guideline on the circumstances of this day? Or dare we say, you don't. You find new moral and spiritual guidelines. But where would they come from? From what source would they emerge? From a book? From what book? From a teacher? From which teacher? Where would... And certainly if it does come from a book, it should be a very, very old book, because truth only emerges from old books, not new books. We all know that. So it's got to be the Bible, or the Quran, or the Talmud, or the Bhagavad Gita, or the Upanishads, or the Quran, or even, well, maybe even the Book of Mormon. I didn't say that. Or the teachings of Baha'u'llah, or somebody very, very old, and some book that's very, very, very old, dusty old book, but not a book that's been written like, a week ago. Because there's no real wisdom or truth in books that have been written within the past month or the past few years. So a book like, Conversations with God couldn't possibly have any truth in it because it's not old enough. In fact, the information in Conversations with God may, in fact, one day be embraced by humanity in around 150 or 200 years. And I'll still be here to see the day. And be able to stand up here and tell you that I was right all along. I told you so. You should have listened to me in the first place. So if we are to find some kind of a new set of guidelines or rules, or not even rules is a bad word, but just thoughts about, additional help. Just some help to deal with. Help based in some kind of firm understanding of theology, of spirituality, and of this thing that we call God, if there even is a God, if we are to find some kind of a new set of guidelines, where would in fact we find it? From whence? Whence would it emerge? Good question. So I've come here tonight with a huge idea. But let me form just a bit more of a basis, a bit more of a foundation before I lay this idea out there for you. I believe that the major social problem of the 21st century, certainly the first half of the 21st century in any event, is going to be the problem of unremitting, unwelcome, unexpected change. Just as the major, not the only, but the major sociological problem of the 20th century was equality. Trying to find a way to bring equality to our racial relations, our gender relations, our political relations. Trying to find a way to kind of level the playing field and give everybody the same fair chance. That has been the major sociological undertaking of humanity in the 20th century. And we haven't solved the problem completely, but taken giant strides. Giant strides. So that in most countries, there is some level of equality and some level of fairness in the way we treat men and women, black and white, gay and straight, even Democrats and Republicans. Can hardly say the word. I just have a little bit of a pushback about Republicans since George Bush was president. But I've discovered that George Bush really, as I look back on it, I've discovered that he was really an extraordinarily intelligent man. Just exactly what was that smirk all about? No, I'm telling you that George Bush, President Bush, was an extremely intelligent guy. I mean, I went to the White House about 4 or 5 years ago. I was invited to speak there at a staff breakfast, actually. I was kind of shocked because I'm not exactly on his A-list of speakers. But I heard that the White House was really inviting lots of different kind of speakers, who even on topics with which they did not fundamentally agree, which I thought was very broad-minded. So I got to go to the staff breakfast. They said, of course, don't expect the president to be here, but talk to the staff. So I stood up to talk to the staff at this breakfast at the White House, but by golly, in the back of the room, in came the president. I guess he wanted to, find out what I had to say. So he kind of like slipped in the back and took a table, and the waitress came over with the breakfast menu card. She, Mr. President, what would you like? And he just whispered in her ear, and she slapped him in the face. And the chief of staff, Andrew Card, said, Mr. President, what was that all about? What happened? He said, I don't know. I just told her I'd really like a quickie. And the chief of staff said, oh, Mr. President, I think that word is pronounced quiche. I just made that up. That never happened. We have a very intelligent president, and so I want to share with you that we are facing an enormous sociological problem in the 21st century, which I believe is going to prove itself out to be the problem of change. That is, things are changing all the time, and they're changing so rapidly that we cannot keep up with the changes. In fact, humanity is threatened to be overrun by its own forward movement. The financial changes of the past 18 months or so are a good example. Who would have thought just a few months ago that major, huge international banks and huge firms would be going under, and that this would affect so many people around the world in many, many countries who would lose their homes, lose their jobs, and because of the stress in some cases, lose their relationships and change everything in the lives of not a few people, but millions of people who have been impacted by this financial crisis. To just give you one example, to say nothing of the many other ways in which life has changed dramatically, socially, economically, politically, spiritually. Another example, for instance, in the United States, they're going crazy about gay marriage. They just can't stand the fact that some states have actually passed laws making gay marriage legal. But the states have done it. So we wake up in the morning and we find that gay marriage and gay partners have the same rights, property rights and so forth, right to visit your loved one if they're dying in the hospital, as straight couples have. And for a lot of people, this is difficult to deal with, and many other changes as well, not to dwell on those two. So we see that we wake up in the morning and all of a sudden the way we thought life was going to be just a few short years ago isn't that way. And there have been some tremendous, huge changes. We're in and out of a relationship, in and out of a job, living in a different city, or a different place. Let's take a survey. How many of you here in the past 2 or 3 years have experienced a fairly important major change in your life? By a show of hands, just raise your hand. Quite a few people. Quite a few, thank you. Quite a few people. And I want to tell you that this phenomena is not limited to this room. You'll find 1 out of 3 people, some cases 2 out of 3 people, wherever you go, raising their hand in answer to a question like that. Now here's what's interesting. With regard to this suddenly shifting landscape, many people, it's awfully warm up here. Many people in the face of this suddenly shifting landscape find themselves without the tools to deal with change. Let me put this in context for you in case you think I'm exaggerating. Just let me place a little context around all of this. In the days of my grandfather and yours, my grandfather could go through almost his entire lifetime without anything major occurring on the planet that would seriously challenge his notion of the world and how things are. In other words, my grandfather held a pretty solid idea of what life is about, how things are, how the whole thing works, what's right, what's wrong, what's this, what's that. And, you know, for the better part of a half century, he wasn't challenged about that with any major development around the world. And even if something did happen around the world, scientifically advanced, some kind of, new discovery, it would be a long time before he heard about it. There was no television. There was not even radio in the early days of his life, so it would be not easy for him to hear about it unless it was something humongous that took place. So my grandfather could live a good long time without anything happening that would shake his ground beneath him. Now, my father, on the other hand, in his life, he'd be lucky if he could get through 25 years. Be lucky if he got through 25 years without something shifting, something changing, something happening there. They landed on the moon. That was the big thing in my dad's life. They landed on the moon. My God. Or they assassinated a president, which was pretty shocking in America. It had happened before, but many, many, many decades earlier, and not in modern times, until they killed President Kennedy. So those kinds of changes, my father, was shaken. I could understand that. Like, what? What's going on? But he could at least get through, 20, 25 years without something like that. In my life, I'm lucky if I can get through 5 years without something enormously life-altering taking place. They pick up the paper, they're talking about cloning sheep, cloning cats and dogs. And it's only a matter of time, you know it and I know it, before we see a headline, first human cloned. And if you don't think that's going to change the moral landscape, think again. of the questions that's going to bring up. And in the lifetime of my children, I think they're going to be lucky to get through a year to 18 months before, because such is the rapid pace of the increase of change, the rapid increase, I'm trying to say, of the pace of change. Change is occurring, is increasing not in a 1, 2, 3, 4 progression, but in a 2, 4, 8, 16, 32 progression. That is, it's exponential. And you can see that. Just read the papers from one year to the next. Just keep a copy, and then you'll see. So I think I've made the case for the idea I would now like to share with you. Because when I was a kid, I got to tell you that I lived in a whole different world, and I never thought these things would change. It never occurred to me. When I was a child, it never occurred to me to worry about stripping down my clothes and jumping into a river or a lake back in the woods and taking a swim on a hot summer day. It never occurred to me that there was a pollution, that the water could be polluted. I didn't even think about such things. It didn't occur to me as a child to worry about locking the screen door to the back of the house, for security reasons. It didn't occur to me that I'd have to be patted down as a child to get into my elementary school. Much less that as an adult I'd have to practically get undressed to get on an airplane. Shoes, belt. So I can't take my belt off. What if I lost a little weight here? My pants are falling down. So you got to walk in. This is really embarrassing, So you can get your belt back. And the security guy says, well, get pants that fit. Hey, I lost some weight. What do you want from me? I lost weight from all the stress, worrying about getting on this damn airplane. So these things, didn't occur to me. It never occurred to me to be careful what I turned on TV, because I might watch one of those reality shows where the chief function of the show is to see how they can make a fool out of enough people in 1 hour period of time. That's it. Stuff has changed. It's a different world. So, because things have changed, we need, it seems to me, a new moral compass, a new set of psychological, philosophical, and spiritual ideas, because we've lost the spiritual underpinnings. And you know something? In places like this, I mentioned when I started talking tonight that from the people I've talked to in Norway, there's not a lot of belief in a kind of a Santa Claus God who, as I said, provides, protects, and punishes. Some people still do, but most people in this country are like, yeah, that's not quite what's going on. And they're pretty advanced in your thinking about that. But here's what's interesting. When you set aside the provider, protector, punisher God, who takes his place? What's next? My wonderful new friend here was asking that question last night at dinner. And I thought, he's just given me my whole talk. You're not getting a portion of the proceeds. But he did. He was sitting across the table from me, and he said, what's interesting is we've thrown the old God out, more or less, but there's, what's to replace? What's there now? What's there? All of which is my way too long introduction to the big idea. I think that what humanity would most benefit from right now, at this particular juncture in its evolutionary process, is a brand new theology. Now notice, I did not say a new religion. I said a new theology. Theology, as I understand it, I hope I'm right about this, I believe comes from the Greek words theology. And if my understanding is correct about that, I think the two Greek words theo and logi mean theo, God, logi, logic. That is, loosely, God logic. Or if you please, knowledge of God. I believe that what humanity could most benefit from right now is a new knowledge of God. A new way of knowing God. To replace the old way, which is clearly no longer functional and no longer working. He said, as he went over to get himself some water, "Talk among yourselves." This guy is crazy, this guy is crazy. This is not the talk I came to hear. I thought he was going to talk about his conversations with God and all the books he wrote. Sorry. I've chosen Norway to be the place where I'm launching the groundwork for my next book, which I started writing here. And the book is called A New Theology, an evolutionary view of God and life. And in small print underneath it, don't blame me, blame the Norwegians. Let me tell you why I believe that a new theology is what's next needed, if you please, by humanity. Why humanity would be so benefited from such a development. Theology, whether we acknowledge it or not, even for those of us who don't have any belief in a God, in the sky and so forth, theology still forms the basis of most of our human laws, that is, civil laws. I've already given you one example of that, with the law against apostasy in certain nations. And there are other examples as well that we could give you from all the nations. If you look at it carefully, the laws that we have with regard to almost every human interaction are based at some level on our earliest laws, which were spiritual laws, given to us, our teachers told us, by a source divine. And so our law against stealing, our law against adultery, our laws against usury, unfair profit, and so forth, all those laws are based fundamentally in our understanding of what God wants. Or to put it simply, our sense of morality has come from our sense of spirituality. And that's not all bad. That's not all bad. Presuming our sense of spirituality is not distorted or warped or twisted in any way, but unfortunately we know that it is. So the warping or twisting of our spiritual understandings can lead us to create, for instance, in the United States, a thing called the death penalty as a means of convincing people that thou shalt not kill. See if I understand that now. We're going to teach you that killing is bad by killing you if you kill someone. Yeah. Makes sense? Because we have God's word for it, because God said an eye for an eye and a tooth for a tooth. And it's in the scripture, and there it is. And that's the basis of our understanding. But of course, we think that the death penalty is a deterrent. That is, it reduces the number of violent crimes, except all the statistics prove otherwise. America still has much higher violent crime rate than countries that don't have the death penalty. Figure that one out. But of course, Americans wouldn't say, well, I guess we're wrong about that, because as you know, Americans aren't wrong about anything. So we see then that it's important what humanity imagines to be God's desires and God's rules. These are not unimportant matters, even though many people don't even believe in a God and reject those notions of God, still enough do, by far, I might add the majority, by far the majority of people on the earth still believe in a God of rules and regulations and guidelines and wants and commands and demands. Speaking of commands and demands, you might find it interesting to pick up a Bible one day. You know the Bible, that book you never read? You pick up a Bible one day. Well, I guess you do. It really offended a lot of people. Did you hear that? Go through the crowd? Ooh. Did you hear what he said? Pick up your Bible again and have a calculator next to you. And as you go through the Bible, I want you to do this. I'm not kidding. This is not a joke. I want you to calculate the number of people that it says right in the Bible that were killed at the hand or the command of God.
1 million. 1 million in the Old Testament.
I know. 1 million in the Old Testament. How do you know? You've actually done that with a calculator?
I read it.
I read it. He read it. In my book, no doubt. Okay. Or somewhere else equally valid, and that's exactly correct. That's exactly correct. 1 million people. Do it with a calculator. Right there in the Bible. Have been killed at the hand or the command of God. Well, no wonder. I mean, really, honestly, no wonder we have no compunction. Compunction being an English word. No wonder we have no compunction about killing people when we think we're right about something. Because after all, what's good enough for God ought to be good enough for us. Huh? Actually, no. Or, to be more accurate in my response to that question, is it possible, just possible, that there's something we don't fully understand about God and about life, the understanding of which would change everything? I think the answer to that is self-apparent. But I also think that we sometimes are arrogant, not we in this room, but people in general. There's nobody arrogant in this room. I think that there are some people who are arrogant enough to say no. No, there's nothing we don't understand about God and about life. It's all there in the book. Just read the book. It's all there in the book. It's in the Bible or the Quran or the Upanishads or the Talmud or something. I forgot what book it is. But it's in, pick a book, any book, pick one book, and if you pick the wrong book, you're going to hell. We are like children, the human race. We're like children who have learned to add and subtract, but have not learned their multiplication tables, much less long division, much less algebra, much less trigonometry, much less calculus, much less higher math. We've merely learned to add and subtract. When in our arrogance we stand up and say that's all there is to mathematics. We've learned the most basic elements of divinity. And mind you, what religions have told us is 90% true. That's why we hang on to it so long. Because so much of it is right and good, and we feel the rightness and the goodness. We feel the truth in so much of what religion teaches us. So we hang on to it and hope that we can somehow resolve the last 10% if we dare to look at it, if we dare to question it, if we dare to create a new theology. And I want to suggest to you that humanity now has begun to lose patience with itself. That we are no longer willing to accept the status quo, to embrace the ideas that have put us right where we are today, or to look the other way and never challenge sacred notions. For centuries, for millennia, we've been unable to move forward in our religious convictions. You know, it took the Catholic Church 600 years to acknowledge that Galileo should not have been excommunicated. I mean, 600 years later, the Pope said, well, that might have been a mistake. I mean, you know, if you're going to hold my feet to the fire about it, all right. A couple of years ago, Pope Benedict actually announced that there's no such place as limbo. That the limbo, in case you're not Roman Catholic, is an ancient teaching that suggests that there's another place besides heaven and hell and purgatory. It's a fourth place called limbo, where souls go if they were good human beings, or maybe even babies, you see, but that died without actually accepting Christ, because they didn't have the opportunity. If they had the opportunity and didn't accept him, do not collect go, do not go, just do not collect $200, go straight to hell. But if you did not have the opportunity to accept Christ as your Lord and Savior, because you were born and died before you were baptized, terrible situation, God forbid, but died in childbirth, if that happened, or if you lived someplace where the gospel hadn't yet been preached, then you could go to limbo. And the Catholic Church taught that. It wasn't exactly heaven, but it was limbo. It wasn't purgatory either. Purgatory is where you go. It's not like hell. Purgatory is where you go if you die with certain sins on your soul, but not mortal sins, venial sins. A venial sin is kind of a spiritual misdemeanor. A mortal sin is a big no-no. If you die with a mortal sin on your soul, there's no chance. You're going right to hell. But if you die with a venial sin on your soul, then you get to go to purgatory and burn off the sins. You're laughing? You're going to purgatory. And you burn off your sins, and so you can be purified, thus to return to God the Father in heaven. So purgatory is kind of like hell, only it's not forever. I've had a couple of marriages like that, but just kidding. Just kidding around. But the Pope announced that limbo does not exist. I mean, I'm not kidding you. After many hundreds of years of teaching this, the Pope declared that there's no such place as limbo, and we were all wrong about that. He didn't use these exact words, but he might as well have said, actually, we made it all up. He didn't want to put it in those exact words. So, it kind of like makes you ask the question, what about all those people that we thought were in limbo for all those thousands of years? What does God say about that? Sorry. Seemed like a good idea at the time. Okay. So you see, we have a problem here. Houston, we have a problem. What do we do when even our top theological sources tell us that it ain't so, McGee? It's not like that. Now what do we do? And how do we believe what they tell us in the future when they tell us after 600 years, well, actually, no. So the answer is for us to, I believe, create a new theology. To ask some questions, first of all. Is it possible that we are more than simple biological incidents? Is it possible that we are not our bodies, that you're not your body, that your body is something you have, but not something you are? And if it's possible that your body is something you have and not something you are, then why do you have it? And who is the you? Are you laughing at my body? I know it's not the greatest, but it's all I have. And if your body is not who you are, but merely something you have, then who is the you that has it? And by the way, while we're about it, if you're not your mind, like, have you ever thought of your own thoughts? Have you ever thought of what you're thinking about? Who's doing that? Who the hell is thinking about what you're thinking about? These are not unimportant questions. There is a you, capital Y. How do you say you in Norwegian? With a D? With a D. Do. There is a you with a capital D. That exists outside of your mind. That is not your body. I think that this is what's true. And I think that this particular you, this particular do, is overdue. For an overhaul. That we need to think of this you in a new way. If this you could be loosely called the human soul, what's it doing with a body? What's it doing with a mind? What's it doing here? Why did it choose to physicalize? What's the point of all of this? Well, if we believe the theology of our ancestors, we just simply find ourselves here essentially by chance, or as a result of our forebears, our forefathers, our earliest parents being thrown out of paradise. You remember that story? Adam and Eve got tossed out of, I mean, they were having a wonderful time in the Garden of Eden. You have to just walk around naked all the time, eating, fruit and vegetables and having a wonderful life. And the temperature was always perfect. And then they invented Norway. But anyway, we were... Just kidding. Lighten up. No, Norway is actually a paradise, and I'll explain about that later. But no, it really is. It's a wonderful... I love it. But here they were in the Garden of Eden, and having a great time. And but God said, you know what? I ask you only one thing. Don't eat of the fruit of the tree of knowledge of good and evil. Or to put it in simple terms, don't eat the apple. That's all I ask, said God. Simple. You can have everything else you can have, just don't eat. So of course it would be a woman. I think I'll eat the apple. Because God said not to. Or they say she was intrigued by the snake, which looked a lot like... Never mind. But anyway, she ate the apple. And God said, I told you don't eat the apple. You have really made me mad. Now you and your children and your children's children and your children's children's children and yea, humanity until the end of time, shall pay for this transgression. You shall be shipped and kicked out of the Garden of Eden. Leave now. And I can recall the picture from my childhood catechism of God's finger from out of the sky, out of the clouds, you know. And there's Adam and Eve skulking out of the Garden of Eden, suddenly covering their loins, as if there was something to be ashamed of, and then all of a sudden wearing, by the way, animal skins. Where they got them, I have the foggiest idea. And we were separated in that moment from God. And that's the story our ancestors have told us. We can laugh about it if you want to, but it created an idea called separation theology. That is, a theology that says that God's over there and we're over here, and never the twain shall meet, except perhaps on Judgment Day, when it will be announced whether or not you get to go there or there. And the direction in which most of us are moving has already predetermined where we're going to go, especially you, sir. I can tell by the look on your face. Because we're going in the wrong direction. You know about the guy who was going in the wrong direction? Did I tell you the story about did you see this on the news the other day? This guy's driving down the road on the highway, major highway, going in the wrong direction. And he gets a call on the cell phone from his wife. He says, hello, it's his wife. She says, honey, be careful, be careful. It's on all the radio, it's on all the news, it's on the television set. They got a helicopter out there with a TV camera. There's one maniac going the wrong direction on the highway. He says, one, they're all going the wrong direction. It's funny when you think you're going the right direction, everybody else is going the wrong direction. So this is the story that we were told by our ancestors, and we swallowed it. We've been kicked out of the Garden of Eden. And so now we have a separation theology. A theology based on the notion that we are separated from God. And you know, it would be okay if that's as far as it went. I mean, if that was the beginning and the end of it, okay, you believe what you believe, I believe what I believe, fair enough. But it's not quite that simple, because a separation theology has produced a separation cosmology. That is a cosmological way of looking at life that says everything is separate from everything else. And a separation cosmology has produced a separation psychology. That is a psychological way of looking at things that says the psyche being another Greek word, he, which means soul. That the psyche is in fact isolated and alone, separate from God, and because of our cosmological way of looking at things, apparently separate from everything else. Isolated, desolated. And not knowing what to do about it. And a separation psychology produces a separation sociology. That is, a society that sees itself as separate from itself, whose members can identify their own best interests, but not anyone else's. Whose members say, you know, as long as your interests and mine coincide, we can cooperate. Be happy to work with you. But if your interests conflict with mine, and I can't convince you to do it my way, I may just have to kill you. We laugh, but this is exactly what's going on all over the world right now. Because a separation sociology ultimately and inevitably produces a separation pathology. That is, pathological behaviors of self-destruction. Pick up the morning paper. So this notion of a separate God is not a small thing. Because if we flipped that notion around, everything in our cosmology, our psychology, our sociology, and our pathology would ultimately change. Not a small thing. And that is the fundamental basis of the new theology. I suggest here tonight that what humanity would most benefit from is the creation of a new knowledge of God, a new theology. A theology that could embrace and contain what I call the missing understandings. The missing understandings. See, is it possible that there's something we don't understand about God and about life, the understanding of which would change everything? And the answer is yes. There is something we don't understand. And so I suggest that we create a new theology and present it to the world and invite the world to simply consider it. Just think about it. And I suggest that we place before humanity some of the misunderstandings, or the missing understandings, the things we don't fully understand about God and about life. And I'm going to give you a list tonight of what those might be. And I'm going to tell you that the first thing on that list will be this. Missing understanding number one about God and about life. There is no separation between God and human beings. None whatsoever. Now, I know that you've read that in my books, so no one is going, oh, do you believe he said that? Do you believe he said that? But consider it as a functionality rather than a concept. I mean, remove it from the conceptual, theoretical framework and see if you can put it into a box called, this is how that would work. This is how that would function if I really thought God and I are one. And if you think about it in those terms, first stand back far enough to notice that this is in fact a revolutionary idea. That is, it would revolve, it would turn everything around in the way humanity holds its experience of spirituality. It's so revolutionary that I'm not aware of a single religion on the face of the earth that teaches that God and humanity are the same thing. If there is one, and I'm willing to be wrong about this, if you know of one, let me know. The one that comes closest, as I observe it, is the Baha'i faith. The faith that was created by the prophet Baha'u'llah. And Baha'u'llah said, we are all brothers and sisters, and we are one with the earth. That is, everything on the planet is a single manifestation. And we are, in that way, deeply connected to and with each other. I'm not sure, however, and again, correct me if I'm wrong, I'm not sure that there's any definitive statement, because I've looked for it in the teachings of Baha'u'llah, where he said, oh, by the way, you're also one with God. That is, you and God are the same exact thing. I may have missed it. Please correct me if I'm wrong. If it is there, it's the only religion that teaches that. The major so-called, quote-unquote, major religions not only do not teach it, but would consider it in fact a blasphemy. What? You're declaring yourself to be the same as God? So consider the revolutionary nature of this statement, which is not a small thing here. If you're one with God, that would mean that you have the same powers and capabilities that God has. You'd be made of the same stuff and be able to do the same things. And I want to add a crucial statement to that. Proportionate to your size. Proportionate to your size. In other words, if God is all of it, and you are that part of it called you, then you can, in proportion to your size as it relates to all of it, affect your particular experience in just as powerful a way as all of it can affect all of it. Or to put this in simple terms, you are as a drop is to the ocean. Now, the ocean clearly collectively has more collective power than a drop. On the other hand, a drop of water within the context of, say, some submolecular, barely visible particle, some submolecular, subatomic particle that you could barely see with a powerful microscope. Next to that subatomic particle, of course, a drop of water would be like the ocean. That is, everything is proportionate in size. So if you took a drop of water, a tiny drop of water, and put it on top of that particle, it could wash the particle away or move it in another way, change its entire experience of itself, even as the ocean could do to us. Therefore, I suggest to you that you have the power and the ability of God in proportion to your size, and you have it for a very important reason, which we'll discuss in just a minute. But let's just assume, for the sake of this discourse, that the first principle of the new theology is God and humanity are in no way separate from each other. That we were not kicked out of the Garden of Eden. We were never separated from that which is, but we are in fact that which is in manifest form. I would like you to go home tonight and think seriously about the implications of that statement. The second missing understanding of the new theology might be this: there is equally no separation between humans and other humans. Now, the Baha'i faith does teach that, but it is just about the only faith on the earth that even teaches that. Oh yes, the mainline religions talk about the brotherhood of man, but they don't go so far as to say that you and I are actually the same thing. That is, we are one not just in philosophy, but in reality. Even as the fingers of my hand are different, but not separate from the body itself. So, the second principle of the new spirituality would be that we are differentiated, but not separated from each other. Go home tonight and consider the implications of that, for they are not small implications. And if these first two principles, and nothing else, just these first two principles, were adopted by humanity, everything about life on the earth would change within 24 hours. Our politics would change, our economics would change, our education would change, our social constructions of every kind would change, and obviously our religions would change. And by the way, I might suggest, in my view, they would all change for the better. And if that doesn't argue for a new theology, then nothing does. If that doesn't argue for us to at least place before humanity an invitation to explore the possibility of creating a new theology, nothing does. We have a choice of hanging on to our old religions, old-time religion, or in fact, letting go of our idea of a providing, protecting, punishing God, and embracing a new idea of a unified God who exists in us, through us, as us, for a particular purpose and reason. Therefore, not a providing, protecting, punishing God, but a purposeful God. The fourth P, a purposeful God. We would therefore, as part of our theological searching, have to ask ourselves, what is God's purpose? A question that has not been really fully resolved by the world's present organized religions. what is God's purpose? That is, what's the point of it all? What's it all about, Alfie? That's an American song. What's it all about, Alfie? Okay, Neale, don't give up your day job. Point number 3 in the new theology would be, there is nothing that humanity lacks to meet its every need. You may remember, if you've read Communion with God, that in that book there are listed the 10 illusions of humans. And you may recall that the first illusion was the illusion that need exists. Yet we have created a God who we imagine to have needs. And out of our thought that God has needs arises our subsequent thought that we must have needs as well. Because again, what's good enough for God must be good enough for us. So we have created in our mind's eye this needy God who needs you to stop committing adultery, which is not going to be easy for you, but give it a try. She's smiling. Well, just kidding. Or am I? Which means that God needs you to honor him and obey him. And God needs you to get back to him along a particular pathway, by the way. And if you don't come by that pathway, it doesn't make any difference how good or wonderful or compassionate or kind or generous you are. Are there any, I'm just curious to know, are there any people of Jewish descent or background in the room? No Jews live in Norway? Where's one? There's one, okay. So here's a guy who is, or maybe was, Jewish. Can't get over there. Let's see if I can get over there.
American too.
He's American too, he said. This makes it really tough, an American Jew sitting in, is anybody around you know you here? Are you by yourself or anybody in this?
They do now.
They do now? So you don't know each other, right? You don't? You know each other? But you mean you're married to this incredible woman and you wouldn't admit it? I have to drag it out of her? Okay, now let's see. That's all right, don't worry. What is your name, sir?
Reuben.
Reuben, of course. You're famous for the sandwich, aren't you? The Reuben sandwich, never mind. Okay, so Reuben the you've been thinking, Reuben the Jew. Now what is your name?
Birgit.
Okay, now, how well do you know this man? You're married, so you must know him pretty well, but is he a nice person?
Very nice, yeah. We known each other for 15 years.
Wow. You mean you married him when you were 3? Okay, so he's a nice person. Is he compassionate?
Very much so, yeah.
Is he a caring, generous person?
Absolutely.
Does he have a sense of humor?
Oh, yes. To me.
Is he kind?
Yes.
You see, she says, keep going, keep going. Now, Reuben, you have been assessed by your loving wife to be kind, compassionate, caring, generous, and all those wonderful things. But here's what I have to tell you, my lovely friend. God doesn't care. You're going to hell anyway. Because you see, you haven't accepted Christ as your Lord and Savior. So, poor guy. You know what's sad? Thank you, Reuben, for being such a good sport. You know what's sad? Billions of people believe what I just said. Not as a joke. They hold that to be true. That's beyond sad. People, what are we doing? What are we doing to each other? In the name of as one theologian said recently, in God's name, can we stop what we're doing in God's name? The next idea of the new theology would be that the purpose of life has nothing to do with material things. Therefore, we can stop struggling for and fighting over material things in our lives. That might seem obvious to us. I'm sitting here saying this, and it's like, yeah, obviously. But if it's so obvious that life has nothing to do with the material, why do we spend 90% of our time focused on it? And by the way, I don't indict the audience. I'm in that group. I've lived my life focused most of the time on material things until I had my conversation with God. And I asked God, what does it take to make life work? I don't understand. What have I done to deserve a life of such continuing struggles? Just tell me the rules. I'll play. Just tell me the rules. And after you give me the rules, don't change them. And God chuckled, I remember the moment well, and said, Neale, it's really very simple. Your life has nothing to do with you, and nothing to do with the stuff you have, the stuff you've gathered, and the stuff you're trying to gather. It has nothing to do with any of that. Whoa, said I. Then what does it have to do with? And said God, the journey of your soul. And everyone else whose life you touch. That's a whole lecture right there. I don't have enough time tonight to go into that. But by the way, I will be here somewhere in this hotel, I think tomorrow and Sunday for a long time. That is, how long do we go tomorrow? From 9 o'clock till what? We start at 9? Like I said, we start at 10? And we go till what? Till 10 at night? That's longer than even I thought. Okay, so 10 to 10, both days tomorrow, explaining a lot of this in detail. I'll also be talking about the mechanics of the mind and the system of the soul, and I will be explaining what I imagine myself to understand as a result of my conversations with God, and how it applies in what I'm calling the new theology. Obviously, it's way, way, way too complex to try to put into 30 seconds here in the middle of this lecture. But I can tell you that the answer I got to my question was, your life has nothing to do with you, nor with any of the things, any of the stuff you've gathered or are trying to gather. Your life has to do with the journey of your everlasting, immortal, and eternal soul. And by the way, I was also told that's not a heavy thing. It's not like, my life has to do with my immortal soul. Oh my God. That certainly makes me want to get up in the morning. In fact, said God, this is the most joyous, wondrous news you could ever be given. Because now you're free of all you thought you had to be and do in order to get the stuff you thought you were supposed to gather in order to be the thing you imagined was successful. Now you're free. And you can really, really enter into the joy and the wonder of life as it was designed. Statement number 5 of the New Theology. All of humanity has the ability to create its own reality, and we are doing it in every moment. That's also revolutionary. You understand that none of the major religions teach that. Not one of the major religions would dare suggest to you what you've already read in Conversations with God, that you are creating your own reality, that you have the ability to create your own reality, that you've been given the tools with which to create your own reality. If major religions taught that, then of course you would have no need to pray, no need for God.
But in Matthews 3:11, I'm not a Christian, but in Matthews, I think it is in Matthews 3:11, it says, believe and you will have. That's just like the law of attraction, no? You think you have it, you will.
I don't know whether you heard him or not, but he says in the Bible, right?
Yeah.
It says, believe and you will have what you believe. As you believe, so will it be done unto you. Absolutely right. But you don't need God to do that. A reporter from one of the major newspapers, what's the really big paper in Norway? Yeah, that guy. He interviewed me yesterday and he said, well, I heard you talk last night in Oslo, and I hear all this stuff about God this and God that and God this and God that, but it's not the God you're describing is a God we don't need. Then what you're trying to say is we don't need God. That's exactly right. You don't need God. The big news of the night is you don't need God for anything. Because God has given you the tools to experience and express whatever you wish to experience and express. The tools this gentleman just talked about. The power of your mind. So you don't need God any more than your children need you, or at least they shouldn't if you've raised them properly, empowered them. The point of being good parents is to empower your children that they can live on past the time when they needed you to a time when they're completely independent and empowered to create and live their own lives. Magnificent lives. Lives even better than the ones you've created. And who among us doesn't wish even better for our children? What makes you think God is any different? So of course God doesn't want to create a dysfunctional relationship with you where you need God and you have to please God and figure out how to please God, and what do I have to do? Bow 3 times to the east or 5 times to the west, or say a rosary or a novena, or what do I have to do? Mea culpa, mea maxima culpa. How do I do this? In order to please God, because then I can get what I need. Like God is Santa Claus. Making a list and checking it twice and going to find out who's naughty and nice. Santa Claus is coming to town. To save your soul, I say, to save. So the next item on the list of our understandings of the new theology is humanity has the ability to create its own reality. Because humanity is not separate from God. That's another reason you don't need God. You don't need what you already have. I don't need a left hand. I've got a left hand. I don't need glasses on my face. I have glasses on my face. I don't need to look like one of the most handsome men you ever saw. I don't know how that stuck in there. I don't know. I don't need what I already have. And that's another reason you don't need God, because God is with you. God is you. God expresses God's self in, as, and through you. Yea, I am with you always, even unto the end of time. Either that's true or it's not. Even religion tells us that. Either that's true, it's part of, by the way, part of the 90% that religion has correct. I am with you always, even unto the end of time. Here's something else that some religions have correct. Said the Master Jesus, I and the Father are one, and we are brothers. Well, what does that make us? But it was Jesus himself who said, why are you so amazed? These things and more shall you do also. Why are you so amazed? So of course you don't need God. God's right here with you. God is you, manifesting through you as you. So the new theology suggests that we move away at last from this idea of a God that we need, from this idea of God the provider, the protector, the punisher, to the God of purpose. The God whose purpose it is to experience God's self, to experience its own divinity through life itself. That life is the physicalization of God, and for a particular reason. See, why would God need life or physicalization to occur in order to experience itself? Because where God is outside of the realm of physicality, in what I call the realm of the spiritual, you might also call it the realm of the absolute, where things are absolutely what they are and nothing else. That is, it's always here and now, and all that exists is absolute love. The human word, the closest we can come to articulating the essence of God. And there's nothing else. See, that was God's only problem. In the beginning, there was only one thing, and one thing was all there is. And it was very good. But there was nothing else. And in the absence of something else, in the absence of that which it was not, that which it was not. You understand? See, in the absence of cold, hot is not. In the absence of short, tall is not. If you want to experience being tall, you will beg for a short person to come into the room. That's why differences have been created. That's why we have created this realm of the physical, where we have a contextual field to produce contrasts that we might know ourselves in our own magnificence. So God said, well, since there's nothing outside of me with which I might compare myself, thus to know myself in my own experience, then what I'm left with is merely a conceptualization. That is, I can conceive of myself as wonderful, as enormous, as powerful, as terrific, kind, generous, caring, and all the rest, but guess what? It's just a concept. I don't want just a concept. I want to experience it. It's kind of like sex. See, I can recall when I was told all about sex, and I held sex as a concept, but at some point in my life, that wasn't enough. I want to experience it. And so God said, how can I experience sex? That is synergistic energy exchange. How can I know who I am in my own experience? Well, I can only do that by placing myself in the presence of that which I am not. But there's a problem, because there's nothing that I am not. I am that I am. I'm the beginning and the end, the Alpha and the Omega. The up and the down of it, the left and the right of it, the here and the there of it, the before and the after of it, the fast and the slow of it, male and female created he them. That's what I am. I'm all of it. So how can I know any of it? I got it. I'll differentiate myself. I'll take the whole that I am and differentiate myself into a million, billion, cajillion individual parts, each of which will be just as magnificent as the whole, but each of which can look upon the rest and say, ah, there I am, and there I am, and there I am. And which of us has not looked up at a starry night, on a clear summer night, and said, oh my God, God, how magnificent thou art. But how many of us have heard God's voice look down upon each of us and say, oh my God, how magnificent thou art. I have heard that voice. And I have been told that we all hear that voice, that I'm not the only one who has had or is having conversations with God, that we're all having conversations with God all the time, but that most of us, this guy included for a long time, deny it. Deny it because we've been told by our religions that God does not talk to us directly. And if you think you're hearing directly from God, you're hallucinating. And of course, if you think that God says you're magnificent, naturally, you're in your ego about it. Ego, ego, ego. Why would God call you magnificent? Maybe because you are. Maybe because you are. And so, the new theology would teach our children a brand new thing about themselves, would share with the youngest among us a new cultural story, a new idea about God and life and who we are and why we're here and what we're up to, the purpose of life itself and the wonder of every human being, including that child himself. No parent would ever say to any child ever again, you are to be seen and not heard, pipe down, be quiet, get small. Principle number 6 of the new theology, there's no such thing as judgment, condemnation, or punishment for any human mistake or error. No one is going to hell, because hell does not exist. Interestingly enough, by the way, the Pope declared, he did, I'm not making this up, this is the truth. Excuse me, I'm sorry, I cry at my own stuff. I mean, this is good stuff. The Pope declared, the previous Pope, not Pope Benedict, I believe it was John Paul, is that John Paul II? The previous Pope declared in an encyclical in July of, I think it was 1998, you can check this out, you can research this on Google, the Pope declared that there is no such place as hell. But boy, did the Catholic Church hush that up very quickly. He said that hell was a construct of the human mind meant to describe the experience of being separated from God forever. But that hell as a place, fire and brimstone and eternal damnation does not exist. By the way, Pope Benedict reversed that encyclical. When the previous Pope passed away and the new Pope was in office about a year or so, he let a respectable amount of time go by, and then he said the previous Pope was incorrect about that, marking the first time in Catholic history that a Pope reversed an encyclical or a theological teaching of a previous Pope. So much for papal accuracy. Principle number 7, and the last principle of the new theology. There is no right or wrong way to get to heaven. There is a thing called heaven, by the way, which I'll be describing this weekend in detail, as I understand it. But there's no right or wrong way to get there. So Reuben is going to get there just as fast as any of us. Maybe he's already there, judging by the wonderful lady that is his wife. Life never ends. but merely changes form. The soul is on an eternal journey of joyful expression. Life was meant to be happy. If you don't believe that, get the book called Happier Than God. And finally, knowledge of all of this was never intended to be a mystery, but is available to anyone who simply and sincerely searches for it. These are the principles of a brand new theology that I invite us to share in the living of our lives with all of humanity. So I've come here to Norway to say, I believe that if we advanced, if we were courageous enough to advance a brand new theology, to suggest that we maintain the best of the old, hold on to that 90% of it which is good and true, but start taking a look at the fine print and start expanding our theological understandings and our theological awarenesses, that we could change everything about the way humanity holds the experience of God, themselves, and life. When everything changes, change everything. You see, because these changes we're seeing on the earth, especially these that are not so welcome, not so good, these changes in how we experience being human are changing everything in our planetary experience of life itself. And the only way we can turn this around now, as I see it, is to change everything about the way we believe life was meant to be, about its purpose, its basis, about this thing that some of us call God, about all of it. And that's going to take a daring revolution, a spiritual revolution. And that's going to require the assistance of some spiritual revolutionaries. That's why I came to Norway. Because if they exist anywhere, they exist here. People who are willing to challenge the status quo, find out what makes sense, what works, and move toward that, and create it and construct it. And in many ways, as I'm sure you know, you've done that. Oh, I know any citizen of any country can complain about the things that aren't working as well as they might and all of that, but on balance, surely you must know that you've created a wonderful, wonderful place to live and to be here. Apart and aside from the breathtaking scope of the beauty of this land, is the beauty of its people and what you've put into place here. Nobody goes bankrupt here and winds up in the poorhouse because they've got a medical condition. You take care of each other. Such a simple idea. Somebody tell Americans about it, please. Nobody is held up to public ridicule here because of their beliefs. You take care of each other. And you give each other the space to be honored individuals. You think I'm exaggerating? I've traveled the world. I've traveled the world these past 15 years. There are a lot of nice places, but there are very few places, if any, nicer than what you've created here. It is its own little paradise. Nice going. Nice going. You know how I know it's a paradise for sure? I told the group in Oslo this story. I'll tell you tonight. Some guy came to my house in Ashland, Oregon, a couple of years ago. Knocked on my door, found me, found my house. Knocked on the door, 10 o'clock at night. I opened the door. Yeah, can I help you? He said, are you Neale Donald Walsch? I said, yes. He said, I'm from Norway. How can I help you? He said, I've read all your books, I've read all your books, I've heard your speeches on tape. He said, show me the yellow legal pad. I want to see how you communicate with God. I said, well, you know, I don't use a yellow legal pad anymore. He said, you don't? Well, what do you use? I said, well, come on in, I'll show you. And I brought him into the house, over there. And on the table in the corner of the house was a blue telephone. He said, what are you telling me? I said, no, pick it up, it's a direct line. He said, get out of here. I said, pick it up. He picked it up. It was him. He asked God all the questions he ever had. He hung up. He was so excited. He said, I can't believe it. I got all my questions answered. That's incredible. I said, isn't it? That'll be $25,000. He said, what for? I said, hey, it's long distance. This guy shows up at my hotel here in Bergen this morning. He says, remember me? Yes, I do. He said, I want you to come to my house. I want to show you something. I said, I can't come to you. He says, come to my house. You have to come. You have to. I said, all right, whatever. So I went to his house. Guess what he had in his house? A blue telephone. I couldn't believe it. I picked it up. It was her. Wow. I got all my most recent questions answered. I hung up. I said, that's incredible. It's incredible. You got to play. Wow, what do I owe you? He said, nothing. Nothing. How is that possible? From Norway, it's a local call. Help me, people. Help me. Some days it feels like I'm doing this all by myself. Give me some help if you can. In about a month, we'll have a website up. We're just creating it now because I've just developed this thought, this new approach here in Norway, actually, on the plane over here. So in a month, our people will have a website up, anewtheology.com, anewtheology.com. Please go there. Give us about a month to put it up. But don't forget, I know it's a month away. Mark your calendars. Put a note in your head. Don't forget. Go there and you'll find out some ways that you can become engaged in the process by which we introduce some new thoughts about God to the world. Something to replace the God we have let go of, and rightly so. Something that can bring us back into the mystery, into the wonder of divinity, which still exists in a form we may not have realized, but will always serve us forever and even forevermore. But I can't do this by myself. And I'm getting older. This is my last time, for health reasons and other reasons, that I'll be here, out here like this. I'm going home. Help me out if you can. If anything I've said tonight resonates with you, help me out. And let's see if we can't make of all of our lives a wonderful, unending conversation with God. Thanks for being here.
I can't just say how deeply touched I am by this man. And two things to say. The first, he said he was going to sign books after these things, we are finished with this. And we are also going to try to help him. And one thing we have done is to, this Henning Jungrini, the man who has illusion, he created something called World Organization called World Peace. And we changed the name, and it came with a lot of donation, and we called it Spirit Peace. And we have decided to give each year a peace prize to one person for doing spiritual work, creating peace. And I want to read this. I have to read it. I'm not, can't just speak directly. Now I have to, I'm a little moved by it. But we created the organization Spirit Peace was because so much of the peace work in our world do not go to the core of the problem. Creating peace is not done through action alone, but through changing our consciousness. And a very necessary part of that change is to realize that we are eternal spiritual beings that is coming from the same source and are part of the same unity. And that's exactly what Neale is talking about. This is also the reason why we've chosen to give the first Spirit Peace Prize to Neale Donald Walsch for his immense and great work for spreading spiritual consciousness on this beautiful little planet of ours, and now, as he also said, hand it on to us so we can try to help him to create this peace. And he has been a great inspiration for the foundation of the organization Spirit Peace. And because in so many circumstances, spirituality has been synonymous with withdrawing from the world and searching for just individual peace and enlightenment. And Walsh, for me, has been one of those who turns this around and sees spirituality as a reason for being part of and changing the world. I thank him for this. It's just spirituality to be in it, not as an excuse to flee from it. And all the contribution he has given to spread this new consciousness is too vast, too numerous to make a list of. But we all know the books he has written, the speech he has gone, and he has also founded something called Humanities Team, which is his own organization for creating this peace, and will, I guess, be organization for this new theology that he is introducing, and they have their own stand outside there, so it's a beautiful idea. But there is with very much great pleasure and deep satisfaction I have to give Neale Donald Walsch this first Spirit Peace Prize ever given, and it consists of a diploma and 50,000 Norwegian crowns to him to use for creating peace as he finds it worthy. And yes, then, and here comes Henning, which is the, stands here, he's the chairman of the organization Spirit Peace. So, he also has to come. So this is the diploma.
I wish I felt I deserved this, but I will accept it on behalf of the 7.5 million people who have read those books, Conversations with God, and who have joined in sharing, each in their own way, and many of you, if not all of you in this room, sharing in your own way by the living of your life in a new way, the messages that have been brought to humanity. This is an extraordinary honor. I'm deeply humbled, and I'm very, very grateful. So thank you all very much. And now, for those of you who would like to do so, we can stay and don't feel you have to. But what I'm going to suggest is that we have just a little 2-minute, I really mean 2-minute break for anyone who needs to leave because you have to catch a tram or whatever to go somewhere. And then after about 2 or 3 minutes, I'll take the stage again and we'll have an opportunity for some questions and answers if you would like, okay? So you can bring the lights up and give people a chance to leave if they want to, and we'll be back out here in just a couple of minutes. So thank you very much for this. This is extraordinary. Thank you. Okay, great. So we have some folks still here, and that's wonderful. Who has a question? We have somebody with a microphone who can travel with you or travel to you. Is there anyone who has a question? Yes. Who's got? Here we go.
Thank you. You said that you're quitting for health reasons. In one of your books, God says that you don't have to be ill. You can just decide to be well. How come you don't do that?
It's more fun to be ill. I have more drama. No, I'm not quitting for health reasons in the sense that I have some kind of illness. I'm quitting for health reasons because if I continue traveling as much as I have been the past 15 years, any further, I may very well. So in fact, I'm going to avoid health problems by stopping because I've been, if any of you followed my life in the past 15 years, you know that we've been gone. I've been away from home most of those years, 32 to 37 weeks a year, which means I've been home about a month and a half or two. And not at one time, a week here, 2 weeks there, 3 weeks here, a week there. Most of the time I've spent on the road, which is why I've been here 3 or 4 times before, and everywhere else as well. So I'm not quitting the traveling because I have health problems. I'm quitting the traveling so that I don't. Thank you. Because as you can see, I'm getting to be an old person. I celebrated my birthday the other day. And I'd like to be around. My lovely wife, Em, would like to have me around for a little longer. Next question.
Hi. I read your books many years ago. And
Why don't you move back down so the person behind you can actually see me?
I'm sorry.
That's okay. She was just yelling. I could hear her yelling in a soft voice.
And since then, it never ends. It's always something new, and you change your conscience, and all your life's changing, and it's coming new information, and all this is so exciting. And when I'm here, I feel really inspiring and feel good. But we are a product of the way we have been taught, and it's like we have to go back to school again. And this is very hard in the daily life, because when I'm changing my ideas with other people, and they say, "Oh, you think it's so easy, if you just change the way you talk to yourself and think that all your life will change." And yes, I really believe that, but it's not easy. So in the daily life, when we face all this challenge with our ego all the time criticizing and fear, what's your advice of the small things we can remember every day to don't forget this? It's because it's hard to be connected all the time. Do you understand what I mean?
Yes, I do understand what you mean. What I would say to you is what God said to me. What is your name?
Susanna.
Susanna, I would say to you, your life has nothing to do with you. And it stops being hard the challenge that you're talking about stops being difficult when you decide that your life has nothing to do with Susanna. I mean nothing to do with Susanna, and everything to do with everyone else whose life Susanna's life touches, and the quality with which you touch it. I got real clear that while I was concerned with and focused on me, my experience, my needs, my wants, my desires, my fears, and all the rest, when my life was focused on that, I found it very difficult to meet the challenges of day-to-day life. But as soon as my life became focused on everybody in this room and everybody else whose life I touch, from my children and my wife and my family on out to the larger universe, as soon as my experience shifted, everything changed inside for me as well, and life started becoming very easy. Then the issue was not do I have what I need, but do you have what you need? Not do I have what I want, but do you have what you want? Not am I experiencing life as joyfully as I wish I was, but are you experiencing life as joyfully as you wish you were? And if not, what can I do about that, if anything? It may be nothing, maybe I can't, but what could I do if I could? And as I began to live life in that way, I followed another prescription from Conversations with God. You may remember in Book 1, Conversations with God gave us 3 words that could change your whole life. Be the source. Be the source. That is, whatever you think you'd like for yourself, whatever you think you'd like more of for yourself, be the source of that exact same thing in the life of another. If you want more money in your life, be the source of more money in the life of another. Give an employee a raise, or just give some money out on the street. Find some way to give someone else who has even less a little of what you have. And you don't have to, it doesn't have to be by the way of fortune. It could be just a small note. But be the source of what you want in the life of another. If you want more money, cause someone else to have more money. If you want more humor in your life, bring more humor into the life of another. If you want more kindness, if you want more companionship in your life, bring more companionship to the life of another. Whatever you want more of, more patience, more kindness, if you want more sex in your life, well, the point is, it works.
In one way, it's like don't take yourself too serious. And
yeah, I never take myself serious. I always got myself in trouble when I took myself seriously. As soon as I began to lighten up about life, I discovered enlightenment.
Thank you.
Just hand the microphone down, that's it.
Right, Neale. I really got this belief in God, but how can I get to this trust in God and this knowing, this knowledge of God?
Okay, first of all, trust is not necessary. Trust is not necessary in life in general, not just trust in God, but trust in anything is not necessary unless you think there's something you need from someone else, the absence of which creates unhappiness in you. If you think that you need something from someone else, the absence of which would make you unhappy, then you got to trust that they're going to give it to you. But if you're very clear that your position on the earth is not the receiver, but the source of everything you imagine yourself to want or to need, then you don't have to trust anyone to give you anything, because you're not there to receive anything from anybody, but merely to give. By the way, let me tell you why giving is so powerful. To finish what I started with this young lady here, the reason that giving others what you want is so powerful is that it gives you a direct experience that you already have it. Then it's just a question of multiplying what you already have, rather than trying to acquire what you think you don't have, which is a much harder psychological problem. So once you discover that you already have it, then it's just a matter of expanding it. And by the way, the best way to expand it is to give even more of it away. And the more you give away, the more you'll realize how much you have. This works with love, by the way, powerfully. The more people you love, the more people you will discover love you, and the more love you will have. And the more you will discover that you had love all along, even though you thought you had none. So the answer to your first question is to, in fact, give that which you wish to receive, just what I said to this lady over here. The answer to your second question, how can I... You don't have to trust God, by the way, to do that. Trust is not necessary. Because, you see, God is not the provider, not the protector, and by the way, not the punisher. See, forget about that. You only have to trust God if you imagine God as the provider. But God is not the provider. God has already provided everything you need. Even before you ask, I will have answered, saith the Lord. Now, either you believe that, or you don't. I believe it. I believe that everything I could possibly need or want in my life to be totally and perfectly happy is coming to me right now. It's on its way. And it always has been, and it always will be. Coming to me in every single golden moment of now. Do I sound like one of those rah-rah positive thinking guys? Of course I do. Because that's how I experience my life. And that's how life is. Because I say that it is. And as you say it, so will it be done unto you. With regard to your second question, how can you have a true knowledge of God?
Like you, because you have heard his voices, but I don't and I don't see God. So I'm having sometimes these doubts.
Yeah,
Does he really exist, or does this Neale guy just kidding me around here, or does he really got it? I believe the second part, yeah. But you know, this doubt coming.
You want to get rid of your doubt?
Yeah.
Great. Cause someone else to get rid of theirs. What do you think I'm doing up here?
Thank you, Neale.
You're very welcome. By the way, I wasn't kidding. That wasn't a punchline. That was my truth. What do you think I'm doing up here? Notice something. All spiritual masters teach. Jesus was the great teacher. The Buddha was the great teacher. Muhammad was the great teacher. Baha'u'llah was the great teacher. Joseph Smith was the great teacher. All spiritual masters teach. Paramahansa Yogananda taught. Thich Nhat Hanh teaches. All great spiritual masters teach. Why do you think they do that? I just told you why. Because as you teach, so will you learn. That which you share, you become. Because that which you are the source of, you source yourself, and you become a sorcerer. Robert, who's the next questioner? Okay, him. Hi, him.
Hello, him. You know, these days you have the Abraham consciousness, and you have the Book of Ra, was written for a couple of years ago, and now you have Neale Donald Walsch, who have been around for 15 years. You have a lot of these spiritual energies, you know, coming down to earth, you know, as it's part of the plan that we as humans are supposed to evolve our consciousness into something more than just get up at 7 o'clock and go to work and get home at 3 o'clock and make some food and go to bed, you know.
You go to bed at 3 o'clock?
No, come home 3 o'clock, you know. You know, we repeat our lives all the time, you know.
Yep.
It's like we are going to a new gate, that we are going to experience some more, that there is more to life than it is now. You know, like before it was the gray and white TV, and now we have the color TV. And maybe if God has said something to you about 20 years ago, that we're gonna have a giant TV with a lot of colors and stuff.
Is there a question there?
Yeah, you know, if it's a plan behind all this, you know, the spirituality.
Yeah.
Because we have been.
That's your question. Is there a plan?
Yeah, if there's a plan, you know, behind all the things that are coming to us, about law of attraction, you know, that come for 2 or 3 years back, but nobody knows about it before then. But now everybody talks about it and want to visualize, want to meditate, and it's happened so fast, you know. So where do you think we're going to be in 10 years from now?
Wherever you say.
Okay, so if I say we're going to have peace all over the world?
Well, I was using the you in the massive plural sense. That is, wherever you say. See, where we'll be in 10 years is where humanity decides to be. Who do you think is doing this to us? This is not happening to us. This is happening through us. And that's important to understand. And there is no plan, capital P, plan, that God doesn't have a plan. Let's see, I think in 2009, I'm going to have Neale show up in Bergen and give a talk to about 600 people.
Yeah, but if you see...
One guy in the corner of that room is going to start asking really interesting questions about my plan. And then it'll give Neale a chance to roll out the whole plan and tell everybody what it is.
No, but if you see it back in history...
And he'll keep interrupting Neale, so he can't roll out the plan.
But if you see back in history, you know, you see Columbus, he saw America, you know, and you have Galileo, and you have Einstein, who have this relativity theory. You know, we have all these masters who have come to the earth, you know, to evolve the human being or the human consciousness, you know.
Are you suggesting that I'm one of those masters?
I don't know, maybe you and Eckhart Tolle, I don't know. Something like that.
Not like Eckhart Tolle.
You know, for sure, man.
Way beyond Eckhart Tolle. Look, there's no, I hate to tell you guys this, there's no plan, but there is a process, okay? There's no plan, but there is a process. And the process is what you described. It's evolution. Evolution moves life forward to ever-increasing levels of magnificence and complexity. It's the only way it knows how to go. It goes forward to ever-increasing levels of magnificence and complexity. And so evolution produces an Einstein, an Eckhart Tolle, and a you. Evolution has produced a you. And evolution asks of you and invites you to answer the question, where will you next have evolution take us? Because you are the next level of evolution upon which the future evolution depends. So you have not a small responsibility and not a small opportunity. I wasn't kidding a minute ago when I said, where will we be in 10 years? It's up to you. Now here's what's interesting. Most people don't see it that way. Most people see themselves as relatively powerless in the face of the huge rolling stone that we call the evolution of humanity and the future of the earth. So we imagine, in fact, that we have very little of a role to play, if any role at all. We imagine ourselves to be largely spectators to a rather spectacular process with which we have nothing to do except to watch and somehow deal with how it's all turning out. But my friends, it's just the opposite. It's exactly the opposite. You are the process itself, each and every one of you. And until you are willing to take responsibility at some sense for all of it, you can experience yourself as creating none of it. That is, you must place yourself in the position of the one who is doing it. That life is depending on you. You know what? I wake up each morning and I think that. I think that. I look in the mirror and I say, life is depending on you, Neale, on you, to bring in a new idea of God and life. Not the next guy, not Eckhart, or Byron Katie, God bless her, or Deepak Chopra. You've all heard Deepak Chopra talk, I'm sure. Life is a possibility of inconsequential things that causes to learn how to God-like them. It's not up to. And I know Deepak well, I have fun with him. But it's not about the next guy. I don't know how to tell you this, but when I was very young, this is a true story, when I was very young, 9, 10, 11 years old, something inside of me said, you're going to do something that's going to touch the whole world. Don't you dare shrink from it when the time comes. You can touch the whole world too, and you will. Should you choose to touch the lives that you do touch as if it were the whole world. Because it is. Because the people you touch will touch someone else, who will touch someone else, who will touch someone else. And I promise you, the ripple in the water will go further than you might ever have imagined. I promise you. The way you move through your life, what you say to your people, how you act in the moments of your existence can truly change the world. And you must understand that the moment in which to accept that responsibility, that ability to respond, that responsibility, that moment is now. Because the world is waiting for your choice and your decision now. So what you say, how you act, how you are with each other, in the smallest ways, will create the biggest outcomes. Because they multiply themselves. But if not now, when? And if not you, who? An anxious world asks those simple questions. If not now, when? And if not you, who? Next question. No more? I've shut the room up.
Hello? Neale, can you hear me?
I can.
You talked about the science, how science has developed, and that maybe theology and religion, well, whatever you call it, should be changed, maybe. What are your views on the economically system in the world, the monetary system? Could mankind benefit from changing it, and more importantly, how can we do it?
Yes, book two of the Conversations with God series answered that question directly. And the subsequent books in the series also touched on it frequently. The answer to the question, in short, is that good night, my dear. Thank you for being here. And what it said in short is that, of course, the monetary system of the world is completely out of whack. It's totally crazy. It's based on supply and demand, to the to the winner go the spoils, a system of competition, and an idea that the way to go through life is to strive for bigger, better, more, bigger, better, more, bigger, better, more. I'll give you one example, and by the way, the book offers an example like this, because you said, you know, how? I'll give you one example. In the books, there are a number of examples of how we could change our whole economic system. One example. Why does everybody have to have a vacuum cleaner in their own house? To give you an example. Do you know how much money we could save and how many people in the world could have what they need if we simply decided that one vacuum cleaner or two for every floor of an apartment building would be enough? We just shared it. We just had, you know, like you vacuum on Tuesday, you vacuum on Wednesday, you vacuum. Nobody vacuums their house every day of the week. I don't even do it once a month. So why do we have to have our own vacuum? Because on the one day out of the week, if that, we want a vacuuming, it's there. I have my very own vacuum cleaner that I use about 3% of the time. Yeah, and I have a washer and dryer that I use that way too. And a bunch of other things as well, like cars and all kinds of stuff that I only use, you know, because we want to have instantly at our fingertips all that we think we need in order to do what we think we want to do, when we want to do it, thank you very much. But in an enlightened society, in an apartment building with 25 units, they probably have 4 vacuum cleaners, or 5, one for every 5 families. And then you get it once a week and be perfectly happy, by the way. And that's just a silly example, it's just a simple example of a whole new economic system that would not be based on supply and demand or having what we want instantly, but in fact, simple need, actual functional need. How often, how many days a week do I really need a vacuum cleaner in my house? To use an example. And we're learning this now about mass transit. We're starting to see this. A car in every driveway, much less 2. One for him and one for her, or 3, one for the kiddies, at some level starts to get obscene. It starts to create more problems than it's worth, as we all know. First of all, trying to keep up with the payments. Secondly, trying to keep up with all the pollution that it creates and all the congestion that it puts on our roads. So somebody came up with a great idea in Japan called mass transit. I mean, really rapid transit. And you get on the plane, get on one of those high-speed trains and you get where you want to go in about 14 minutes, clear across the city, a huge city like Tokyo. And because some people are starting to get, oh, there's another way to do this. Now I'm using just simple examples. There are obviously far more sophisticated and complex examples than those. But to answer your question directly, the financial system, the system of economy in the world is crazy. And it allows 5% of the world's people to hold 95% of the world's resources and wealth. And that's obscene. That was an applause line, by the way. That's my shorthand answer. If you want the detailed answer, check out the books. That question is answered directly in the books.
Yeah, thank you.
You're welcome. We'll take two or three more questions and we'll call it a night. It's getting toward, it's 9:45. We still have a couple of hours. I mean a couple of minutes. Yeah, yes.
Hello, Neale.
Hi. Good night, my dear.
The new theology, it sounds...
By the way, if you continue to leave, I'm going to call you by name. Go ahead. It's okay.
The new theology, it sounds very good.
Thank you.
And it sounds also quite easy to embrace. Had it not been for, in the Revelations in the Bible, eller åpenbaringen, in the last chapter and the last verses it says, do not add anything to this text.
Right.
Would not the new theology be contradicting the Bible?
Well, of course it contradicts the Bible all over the place. That's the whole point.
Yes,
You know,
and that's my question.
here's what I really have a problem with in Scripture that offers as its authority its own authority. That's like me saying, by the way, I know I'm right because I say that I am. Because the Bible says, don't add anything to this. Well, what's it supposed to say? Add whatever you want. This is not really that good. Well, let me tell you what the Bible says in case you missed it. In case you missed it. The Bible says that if a man or a woman commit adultery, they are to be taken to the town gates and stoned to death. The Bible says that if a woman is caught wearing men's clothing, she is to likewise be stoned to death. The book of Deuteronomy says that if your children are rebellious and refuse to honor their father and their mother and do what they are told, they are likewise to be taken to the town gates and stoned to death. The Bible says that if a man has an injury to certain of his body parts, and the Bible is very specific about this, by the way, if you haven't read your Bible, the Bible says that if a man somehow has lost his testicles in war or through some illness, he is not allowed to worship in the house of the Lord. So yes, it contradicts the Bible. Thank you very much.
The question further was, how would you get a normal Christian to believe in the new theology? But you did answer it. Thank you.
You could also just try beating him.
That might work.
That probably wouldn't work so well. It wouldn't be real Christian to do that. Just kidding. All right.
Hello.
I can't see. You got to get Robert's
nervous.
attention. You can't get mine. You got to get Robert to call on you. Yes, ma'am.
I'm very nervous, but
Don't be nervous.
I have wondered about this for a very long time. So I'm first asking, this source you are connected to, this source are something we have inside us, right?
It's not just something you have inside you. It is
Yeah,
you.
it is us, I know. And then, so we can get connected to this source too.
You are already connected. You can't get connected. You already are connected. You either just know it or you don't. But you already are connected.
And so on, we can get the answers from that source. All the answers that you have got.
Yes, you already have the answers. You just don't know that you have them.
Okay. Yes. That was my question. Thank you.
I didn't mean to shut you up. But in fact, it's true, my dear. It's not a question of reaching out to grab something or to get something. The whole point of the new theology and the whole point of Conversations with God is to announce to you that you already have what you're searching for, you already are what you're trying to be, and you already know what you think you don't know. You see, there are some people who, by the way, don't know. In fact, I got to tell you something. I've noticed that people fall into several categories. And a lot of folks wouldn't even understand what we're talking about here tonight. You know that, and I know that. A lot of people don't know, and they don't know that they don't know. They are at least pure in their not knowing. So I'm serious. So nurture them. Nurture them. Then there are those who don't know, but they know that they don't know. They are willing. Teach them. Then there are those who don't know, but they think that they know. They are dangerous. Avoid them. Then there are those who know, but who don't know that they know. They are asleep. Wake them. Then there are those who know, but they pretend that they don't know. They are actors. Enjoy them. But don't get caught up in their dramas, because they're making the story all up. And then there are those who know, and who know that they know. These are the cognoscenti, those who know. And the question then becomes not, do you know? But what will you do with what you know? what will you do with what you know? It's the most profound question of your life. Robert, who's got the last question?
Now it's me, Arne, from the back of the cabin. I'd like to just have a question I thought about for a long time. 20 years ago, I used to be a professional football player, or soccer player in your country. I played in Greece, and I had a little bit of success. And if somebody asked me why I had that success, my first answer would be, I felt closer to God. But how can I explain that in a commercial world where everything is taken to psychology? And do you see any conflict in how to, because it easily can be explained by psychology, but I felt something more. And how can I really have people to believe that?
The question is not whether people believe it, but whether you do. And I'll tell you this, what you believe, people will believe, is your experience. Let's talk about psychology. It's an interesting word, psychology. Let's split it up again. Psychology. Psyche, once again from the Greek, means she, he. It's a Greek word, she, he. Psyche, meaning the soul. Logi, once again, logic. Soul logic. Psychology, from the Greek, soul logic. The word psychology grew out of the Greek study of the human soul, the human spirit. Only in the Western world have we decided that psychology will have nothing to do with the soul. Even though the word is about the soul. So we should really call it bodology, because it has to do with your body, or mindology, or crazyology, or some other kind of ology. But we shouldn't call it psychology. However, using the term as we now misuse it, how can you help get your message through in this area of psychology, which can explain how you became successful at soccer? My dear friend, I want to tell you something. If you told people what you just said to me, as sincerely as you just said it to me, if you stood in front of groups, Rotary clubs, Lions clubs, organizations, church groups, or anybody else you wanted to talk to, and said, let me tell you something. I became a professional soccer player against all odds. Not many people do that. And I did it because when I was doing it, as I was doing it, I felt closer to God. If you tell people that, they will believe you. If you tell them the way you told us here tonight. And you'll be amazed at how many people will feel your heart and your soul in your statement. But if you're afraid to say it, because you're afraid that people won't get it, then you'll never be able to say anything of significance to anyone else for the rest of your life. See, I've got to be real clear that it doesn't, at some level, it can't matter to me whether you get or agree with what I'm saying. You understand? Because if I'm concerned about that, I can't say anything up here. I've got to talk my heart, speak my soul, and share my truth. And you get it or you don't, and it's got to be okay with me either way. Can you see that? And that's what I offer you as well. Speak from your heart, speak from your soul, share your experience, and let those who have ears to hear listen. And those who do not will not. And if there's anybody in the room tonight who heard what I had to say and just doesn't get it, it's not a problem. You're going straight to hell. But if that's not a problem for you, it's not a problem for me. Now here's a person who won't even smile. I'm being funny as heck up here, and this person's like, nope, I'm not going to smile. I had a person like that at one of my retreats a few years ago. I'm only kidding. I had a person at one of my retreats a couple of years ago. She sat in the front row. And no matter what I said, you know. And the more I tried to talk, the more she's like. I finally said, "Excuse me, I'm so sorry. I mean, can I just ask you a question?" She said, "Yeah." I said, "Are you a happy person? I mean, like, are you happy right now in your life?" She said, "Yeah." I said, "Wow, you ought to tell your face about it." So if you're happy, tell your face about it. I'll leave you with 3 tips tonight that can change your life overnight, and then we'll say goodbye. Here are 3 tips that I left with the folks in Oslo. They're simple tips. They're so simple you might even call them simplistic. I don't mean to be simplistic, but let me just share them with you from the For What It's Worth department. Tip number 1. If you want to change your life in 90 days, smile. That looks like this. Smile, it won't break your face. It won't break your face, I promise. I'm not going to smile. See, in fact, some guy wrote a book called Smile 5 Times a Day for No Good Reason. And you know, they tell us that smiling is actually health producing. Did you know that? It releases, what do we call them? Enzymes or endorms or whatever the hell. And it releases chemicals in your body that are actually very health producing. Also, if you smile, you know, in public, which I hope you do, people will feel good as well, because if you smile at somebody, it's your way of saying, I agree with what I'm looking at. I agree with what I'm seeing over there when I see you. Nothing can heal the space between people faster than a simple smile. So give it a try. And watch if you do it for 90 days, smile 5 times a day for no good reason for 90 days. And I mean for no good reason. I don't mean smiling when, you know, you hear a funny joke or something clever, but smile like, you know, like first thing in the morning when you get to the mirror out of bed, you know. This is as good as it gets. Tip number 2. Look at each other. Look people straight in the eye. For more than a count of 3. You know how hard it is to look at somebody for more than a count of 3? See, we've been told not to. We've been actually told not to. Don't stare, it's impolite. We're so afraid of looking at each other that we just don't do it anymore. We won't even look at each other when we're making love. We close our eyes. What are you afraid of? So what are you closing your eyes about? Look at me. Look at me. I'm making love with you. Look at me. You think it's easy to look at somebody? Get on an elevator sometime. We start looking at our shoes, for God's sake. We read the health and safety notice on the wall, I mean, whatever. Anything to get away from. And then finally our floor comes. I almost had to look at somebody in there. Look at people. All we want is to see and be seen. That's all we want. See me. Look into me. Into me see. Intimacy. Don't look away when I come down the street. But you know why we're afraid to look at each other in the eye? Because the eyes are the windows of the soul. And we know that. At some level, we know that. We're very clear that if I look at you and don't take my eyes off of you for a very long time, in a very short time, I'm going to have no choice but to fall in love with you. Really. Because what we see behind those eyes is what we know is behind ours. If you look at someone in the eye and don't take your eye away, you're going to sooner or later, and probably sooner than later, see yourself. And then how can you not forgive? And then how can you hold on to your resentment and your anger and your justifications? So look at each other for more than a count of 3. And look at your beloved when you make love. The tip number 3. Touch. Touch. Do you know how many people have lived years now without touch? Any really intimate or gentle, loving touch? We've told ourselves we can't touch each other. It's not okay. Teachers can't even touch the kids anymore in class. Like, nice going, Johnny. You can't. Gotta be careful because somebody's gonna sue us for inappropriate touching. What has happened to our world? What are we doing to each other? What's going on here? For God's sake, touch each other. It's okay. It's okay. Touch whenever you can. Hi, nice to meet you. Good to be here with you. Thank you for coming. I'm glad you're here, for heaven's sake. Touch each other. Look at each other. Smile at each other. Remind each other of who they are and give people back to themselves. And your life will be a conversation with God.
Imagine a road far as you can see. If you cast your eyes into infinity, for millions of miles, paths of yesterday. Sure, you've traveled far, but never lost your way.